Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. The smell of roasted turkey filled the suburban Chicago home, mixing with the crisp November air that leaked through the old windows. 24-year-old Marcus Chen sat at the dining room table, picking at his mashed potatoes while his younger sister Emma talked excitedly about her new job at the marketing firm downtown. The familiar weight of disappointment settled on his shoulders as he watched his parents' faces light up with pride. "And they're already talking about promoting me after just 3 months." Emma continued, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "The salary increase would be amazing." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," their mother, Linda, beamed, passing around the cranberry sauce. "We're so proud of how well you're doing." Marcus forced a smile, the same hollow expression he'd perfected over the past 2 years since graduating from art school. While Emma had landed on her feet immediately, he'd been struggling to find his place in the world. His portfolio sat gathering dust in his childhood bedroom, rejected by gallery after gallery, while his part-time job at the local coffee shop barely covered his student loan payments. "What about you, Marcus?" his father David asked, his tone noticeably cooler. "Any updates on the job front?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus could feel his family's eyes on him, waiting for an answer he didn't have. "I'm still looking," he mumbled. Taking a large bite of turkey to avoid elaborating, David set down his fork with a deliberate clink against the china. "Still looking. That's what you said last Thanksgiving, and the Thanksgiving before that, David," Linda warned quietly, but he pressed on. "I've been patient, Marcus, further than patient, but you're 24 years old, living in our basement, contributing nothing to this household while your sister." "I contribute," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharper than intended. "I help around the house." "Helping around the house isn't paying rent?" David shot back. "It isn't taking responsibility for your life. Your mother and I work full-time jobs to keep this roof over our heads, and you treat this place like a free hotel." The dining room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Linda nervously adjusted the centerpiece. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. "I'm trying, Dad. The art world is competitive." "And the art world," David repeated, his voice heavy with frustration. "Marcus, I supported your dreams through 4 years of college. I paid for your supplies, your exhibitions, your everything. But at some point, dreams have to meet reality." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "So what are you saying, that I should just give up?" David's expression hardened, and Marcus recognized the look. It was the same one his father wore during difficult business meetings. The face of a man who'd made an irreversible decision. "I'm saying that if you don't start paying rent, real rent, not token contributions, then don't come back after Christmas. I mean it, Marcus. You have until January 1st to figure out how to support yourself." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked around the table at his family. His mother's horrified expression, Emma's wide eyes, his father's resolute face. This wasn't an empty threat or a moment of holiday stress. This was an ultimatum. "You're kicking me out," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm forcing you to grow up," David replied. "There's a difference." Marcus felt the familiar surge of emotions he'd been suppressing for months: fear, anger, disappointment in himself, and a crushing sense of failure. Without another word, he turned and walked away from the table, leaving behind the warmth of the dining room and the shocked silence of his family. In his basement bedroom, surrounded by canvases and art supplies that suddenly felt like relics of a childish dream, Marcus sat on his bed and stared at his reflection in the window. Outside, the Chicago suburbs stretched endlessly. Rows of similar houses filled with families who probably weren't having the same conversation he'd just experienced. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. He didn't mean it. Give him time to cool down. But Marcus knew better. His father never said things he didn't mean, especially not with that tone of finality. David Chen had built his accounting firm from nothing, working 16-hour days to provide for his family. He understood struggle and sacrifice in ways that Marcus was only beginning to comprehend. As the evening wore on and the sounds of cleanup drifted down from upstairs, Marcus began to understand that this Thanksgiving had changed everything. The safety net he'd taken for granted was gone, and for the first time in his adult life, he was truly on his own. The question wasn't whether his father meant what he'd said. The question was whether Marcus had the courage to prove he was capable of more than everyone, including himself, believed possible. Chapter 2. The Reality. Check the Monday morning after Thanksgiving hit. Marcus like a Chicago winter wind, sharp, cold, and impossible to ignore. He'd spent the weekend avoiding his family, emerging from the basement only when he was certain the upstairs was empty. The house felt different now, less like home and more like a temporary shelter with an expiration date stamped in bright red. January 1st. Sitting in the break room of Grind Coffee on North Halsted, Marcus stared at apartment listings on his phone. While his coworker Jake rattled on about his weekend plans, the numbers were brutal. Even the seediest studios in questionable neighborhoods cost more than his entire monthly income from the coffee shop. "Dude, you look like someone ran over your dog," Jake observed, sliding into the chair across from him. "What's wrong?" Marcus set down his phone and rubbed his eyes. My dad basically gave me 5 weeks to move out and start supporting myself. Ouch. Jake winced. That's rough, man. But maybe it's what you need. I mean, you've been talking about feeling stuck for months. Easy for you to say. You live with 3 roommates and split everything 4 ways. I can't even afford a closet in this city. Jake leaned forward, lowering his voice as their manager walked past. Look, I wasn't going to mention this because I know you're all about the art thing, but my cousin Tony owns a moving company. He's been looking for reliable guys, and the pay is decent. Not amazing, but decent. Moving furniture? Marcus felt his stomach drop. It was so far from anything he'd ever imagined himself doing. It's honest work, man. And Tony's cool. He might let you work around your coffee shop schedule until you figure things out. Before Marcus could respond, their manager called them back to the floor. The afternoon rush was beginning, and the familiar chaos of steaming milk and grinding beans provided a temporary distraction from his spiraling thoughts. But between customers, reality kept creeping back in. Every order he took, every latte he made, felt like a reminder of how far he was from where he thought he'd be. At 24, his art school classmates were scattered across the country now, some working at galleries, others teaching, a few even making it as working artists. Meanwhile, he was memorizing coffee orders and calculating whether he could afford ramen for dinner. During his break, Marcus called Jake's cousin Tony Benedetto, had a voice like gravel and a laugh that suggested he'd seen every kind of person life could throw at him. Jake says you need work, Tony said without preamble. I need guys who show up on time and don't break my customers' stuff. Can you lift 50 pounds? Yes, sir. Good. Be here tomorrow at 7 a.m. We'll see how you do. Address is 2847 West, Diversey. Don't be late, I fire people for being late. The call ended before Marcus could ask about pay or schedules. He stared at his phone, feeling like he'd just jumped off a cliff without looking down. That evening, he found his mother in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. Linda looked up when he entered, her expression a mixture of sadness and hope. How was work, honey? Fine. Mom, I need to ask you something. Marcus leaned against the counter, trying to find the right words. Did Dad really mean what he said? On Thursday, Linda's hands stilled on the dish she was washing. Your father doesn't say things he doesn't mean. Marcus, you know that, but 5 weeks, right before Christmas. She turned to face him, and Marcus saw the exhaustion in her eyes, not just from the day, but from months of watching her family navigate this growing tension. Marcus, you're a good person with a kind heart, but you've been drifting for 2 years. Your father and we've watched you get smaller and smaller, like you're disappearing into yourself. Maybe this isn't the way we would have chosen, but maybe it's what you need to find yourself again. I got another job, he said quietly. Moving company, starts tomorrow. Something shifted in his mother's expression, surprise, followed by what looked like relief. That's good, honey. That's a start. It's not what I went to school for. No, she agreed, drying her hands on a towel. But maybe that's okay for now. Maybe what you went to school for will still be there when you're ready for it. Later that night, Marcus sat in his basement room, looking at his paintings with new eyes. Some were good, he could see that objectively. Others were the work of someone still learning, still finding his voice. But all of them had been created in this room, in this bubble of safety and support that he'd taken for granted. He picked up his sketchbook and began drawing, not the careful, deliberate strokes he used for his serious work, but quick, honest lines. He drew his father's face at the dinner table, hard with disappointment. He drew his mother's hands washing dishes, worn from years of work. He drew Jake behind the coffee counter, steam rising around him like a halo. For the first time in months, Marcus felt something other than fear or frustration. He felt curious about what came next, about who he might become when he stopped being afraid of failing and started being afraid of never trying. Tomorrow, he would move furniture. Tonight, he would pack up his childhood and prepare to meet the world as an adult. Chapter 3, Finding Ground. The alarm clock's harsh buzz cut through the December darkness at 5:30 a.m. Marcus rolled out of bed, his body already protesting the early hour, and stumbled toward the shower. 3 weeks into his new routine, the initial shock had given way to a grinding exhaustion that lived in his bones. Benedetto Moving Company occupied a warehouse in a part of Chicago that most people drove through without stopping. Tony Benedetto himself was exactly what his voice had suggested. A stocky man in his 50s with arms like tree trunks and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of his father. Chen. Tony's voice boomed across the warehouse. As Marcus signed in, "You're with Rodriguez and Martinez today. Fancy neighborhood Lincoln Park. Don't break anything expensive." Miguel Rodriguez was a 28-year-old father of 2 who'd been working for Tony for 3 years. Carlos Martinez, barely older than Marcus, treated every moving job like a personal fitness challenge. They'd taken Marcus under their wing with the casual kindness of men who understood that life could knock anyone down at any moment. "You getting used to it?" Miguel asked as they loaded the truck with boxes and furniture. "Pads, the first month's always the hardest." Marcus flexed his shoulders, feeling the ache that had become his constant companion. I think my body's finally figuring out what's happening to it. Wait till winter really hits, Carlos laughed. Then, you'll know what suffering is. The house in Lincoln Park was everything Marcus's family home wasn't sprawling. Modern, with floor-tootling windows that let in floods of natural light. As they carried a massive sectional sofa up the front steps, Marcus caught a glimpse of paintings on the walls. Real paintings by artists he recognized from his art history classes. Beautiful house, he commented to the homeowner, a woman in her 40s wearing paint-splattered jeans. Thank you. My husband and I are both artists, so we needed the space. She paused, studying Marcus's face. You look familiar? Are you local? I grew up in the suburbs. Went to the Art Institute for undergrad. Her expression brightened. Kidding. What's your medium? Oil painting. Mostly some mixed media. Marcus felt the familiar twist in his stomach when discussing his art. Though I'm not really practicing much these days. That's a shame. The city has such a vibrant art scene. Have you been to the River North Galleries? There's a great Cope space that shows emerging artists as they finish the move. The woman? Sarah handed him a business card along with his tip. My friend runs a gallery in Pilsen. She's always looking for fresh talent. Tell her I sent you. Back in the truck, Miguel noticed Marcus staring at the card, making connections. Maybe. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Showing people your work? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ready to fail publicly instead of just privately. You know what's funny about failure? Carlos said from the driver's seat. It's the same whether people see it or not. Might as well have witnesses at least. Then someone can tell you what went wrong. That afternoon, they moved a college student out of a studio apartment that made Marcus's basement room look spacious. The kid, probably 21 or 20, was moving back in with his parents after dropping out of Northwestern. I just couldn't hack it, the student said, as they loaded his few possessions. Thought I was smart enough, but turns out everyone there was smarter. Marcus found himself thinking about that conversation later, during his shift at the coffee shop. The kid had looked defeated in a way that felt familiar, like someone who'd built his identity around being good at something, only to discover that being good wasn't enough. You're different lately, Jake observed during their closing routine. More focused or something? I'm tired all the time. That's probably what you're seeing. No, it's something else. Like you're not carrying around that heavy cloud anymore. Jake was right, though Marcus hadn't noticed it himself until it was pointed out. The constant anxiety that had plagued him for months, the feeling of being stuck, of wasting time, of disappointing everyone, including himself, had begun to fade. Not because his problems were solved, but because he was finally doing something about them. When he got home that evening, Marcus found his father reading in the living room. They'd barely spoken since Thanksgiving, exchanging only polite greetings when their paths crossed. David looked up as Marcus entered, taking in his son's work clothes and tired expression. How's the new job? Hard, Marcus answered honestly, but good, I think. Marcus sat down on the edge of the couch, suddenly too tired to maintain the careful distance they'd been keeping. I'm learning things I didn't know I needed to learn. About work? About myself. David set down his book. Such as? That I can do things I thought I couldn't do. That most people are just trying to get by. Same as me. That maybe there are different ways to be successful than what I thought. His father nodded slowly. Those are important lessons. Dad, I want you to know I'm going to make the deadline. I'll have first month's rent and a deposit saved by New Year's. I found a place with 2 roommates in Pilsen. It's not much, but it's mine. For a moment, David's carefully maintained expression cracked, revealing something that looked like pride mixed with relief. I'm glad to hear that, son. I really am. I'm still going to paint, Marcus added. Maybe not every day, maybe not the way I thought I would, but I'm not giving up on it. I never wanted you to give up on it. I wanted you to grow up around it. That night, Marcus sat in his basement room for what he knew would be one of the last times. He picked up his sketchbook and began drawing again. Not the desperate, emotional sketches of a few weeks ago, but something new. He drew Miguel's hands, careful and sure as they wrapped furniture. He drew Carlos laughing at his own joke. He drew the woman in Lincoln Park, paint on her clothes and light in her eyes. He was drawing the world as he was learning to live in it, not as an observer from the safety of his childhood bedroom, but as a participant, someone who had earned his place through work and uncertainty and small daily choices to keep moving forward. Chapter 4. Coming home December 31st. Arrived with a bitter wind that cut through Chicago's streets like a knife. Marcus stood outside his new apartment building in Pilsen, holding a single duffel bag and a portfolio case, waiting for his roommates to come down with the keys. The building was old but solid, with murals covering the walls and the kind of character that came from decades of housing dreamers and strivers. His roommates, Sophia and Derek, were graduate students at UIC. She's studying social work, he working on a master's in urban planning. They'd found each other through Craigslist and a shared need for affordable housing in a neighborhood where artists could still breathe. Welcome home, Sophia said, handing him a key ring. It's not much, but the rent's split 3 ways and the heat actually works. The apartment was small, a converted 2-bedroom with a living room that doubled as Derek's workspace. Marcus's room was barely larger than a closet, but it had a window that faced east, promising morning light. As he set down his bag, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Possibility. Later that afternoon, he returned to his parents' house to collect the last of his belongings. The basement felt different now, smaller, somehow, like a skin he'd outgrown. His mother helped him pack his art supplies, wrapping each tube of paint with the same care she'd once used to pack his lunch for school. "I put together some things for your kitchen," she said, indicating a box filled with mismatched plates and utensils. "Nothing fancy, but enough to get started. Thanks, Mom, for everything." Linda paused in her packing, holding a paintbrush they'd bought together years ago. "I want you to know, Marcus, your father and I, we never doubted your talent, we just wanted you to find your strength." "I know. I think I'm starting to understand the difference." David appeared in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Need help loading the car?" They worked in silence, carrying boxes and canvases up from the basement. As they loaded the last of it, David cleared his throat. "I have something for you." He handed Marcus an envelope. "It's not much, but I thought you might need it for the transition." Inside was a check for $500, not enough to solve his problems, but enough to buy groceries for a few weeks, to ease the transition from dependent to independent. "Dad, I can't." "Yes, you can. Consider it an investment in your future." "But Marcus," David's expression grew serious, "this is the last time. From now on, you succeed or fail on your own merits. Understood?" Understood. That evening, as Chicago prepared to celebrate the new year, Marcus sat in his empty room in Pilsen, surrounded by boxers and possibility. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Proud of you, big brother. Want company for midnight?" She arrived an hour later with Chinese takeout and a bottle of champagne. They sat on the floor of his new living room, eating lo mein from cardboard containers and talking about everything except the obvious changes in their family dynamic. "You look different," Emma said, as the clock approached midnight. "Older, maybe, or just more solid. I feel different. Like I'm finally living my own life instead of some version of what I thought my life should be." Outside, the neighborhood came alive with fireworks and shouting. Through the thin walls, they could hear their neighbors celebrating, families, and couples, and other young people trying to make their way in the world. "Do you think Dad was right?" Emma asked. "To do what he did?" Marcus considered the question as the countdown began somewhere. In the distance, 6 weeks ago, he would have said no without hesitation. His father's ultimatum had felt cruel, unfair, impossibly harsh. But now, sitting in his own space, responsible for his own rent and his own choices, he wasn't sure. "I think he was right about the outcome, even if I hated the method," he said finally. "I needed to stop waiting for permission to live my life." The countdown reached 0, and the night exploded with celebration. Emma hugged him, and for a moment, Marcus felt the weight of everything that had changed and everything that was still possible. The next morning, January 1st, Marcus woke up in his own bed in his own room. The apartment was quiet, his roommates probably sleeping off their New Year's celebrations. He made coffee in the small kitchen, using the mismatched mugs his mother had packed, and sat by his east-facing window as the morning light crept across the floor. He thought about Sarah's business card, still tucked in his wallet, about the gallery in Pilsen that showed emerging artists, about the paintings he wanted to create, not from the safety of his childhood bedroom, but from this place of uncertainty and possibility. At 7 a.m., his phone rang. "Tony Benedetto." "Chen, you sober?" "Good. Got a big job today. Family moving from Lincoln Park to the Gold Coast. Triple overtime because it's New Year's Day. You in?" "I'm in." 2 hours later, Marcus was back in a truck, with Miguel and Carlos, heading toward another day of work that was hard, but honest. That paid his bills, and taught him things he couldn't learn any other way. As they drove through the city he was learning to call home, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of earning his place in the world. That night, he unpacked his art supplies and set up a small easel by the window. He didn't know what he would paint, or when, or whether anyone would ever want to see it, but for the first time in months, that uncertainty felt like freedom rather than fear. His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Proud of you, son. Happy New Year." Marcus smiled, picked up a brush, and began to paint.